Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Grant Morgan. While most of us were busy hoarding toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic, Grant was working on a plan to change the world. As CEO and co-founder of R0, he set his sights on developing groundbreaking biosafety technology to save lives in the COVID-19 era and beyond. And in less than 2 years, he built an all-star team and developed partnerships with over 600 schools, the Mayo Clinic, and the U.S. Olympic team. And now the company is valued at over $250 million. I'm excited to have him on the show to talk about how he built his company and the leadership lessons he learned along the way. So Grant, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to meet you and great to have you on the show. And congratulations on all your success so far. And I'm sure it's just the beginning. It sounds like you're doing something that's very much needed in the world. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. It's humbling. It's been a wild ride. And like you said, we're just getting started.
Yeah, that's wild. So first of all, tell us about your background. We talked a little bit beforehand. We're both engineers, both mechanical engineers. So how did you go from being an engineer and you worked at a global company like I did? How did you go from that to a startup CEO in a high technology space and growing in leaps and bounds? How did that happen?
It's actually a little bit accidental, a little bit intentional, but I'm actually going to start before I even got to college. So I was applying to a bunch of schools for different things from, math to business to engineering and everything in between. And the school I ended up going to, Cal Poly, you have to declare your major when you apply. And so I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I figured, hey, I like Legos and I'm good at math. So let's try mechanical engineering. And so mechanical engineering became my major. And that was worked out for me pretty well. But when I was graduating, I thought about how I wanted to apply what I was learning and, could have gone into oil and gas industry or energy. I could have gone into automotive and a number of different options, but I decided I wanted to do something that applied myself, my time, my energy, my skill set to something that at the end of the day was helping people. And so I got into healthcare. And I worked for a giant company called Abbott. At the time, it was like a 90,000 person international healthcare conglomerate. And I did their management development program where I got to rotate every 6 months for 2 years. I got exposed to different business units, different functions, got to meet a lot of really impressive people and learned a ton. But one of the things I learned is that I wanted a sort of bigger slice of the pie and broader set of responsibility. And so jumped ship to a smaller med device startup called NDC at the time. Now they're called Confluent, I believe. But I got to stand up and lead our neurovascular value stream. So my team would basically take a napkin sketch from like a Stryker, J&J, Medtronic, all the big dogs, and take a napkin sketch and an idea of a therapy that they wanted to bring to market. My team would figure out how to design, develop, manufacture, scale it up, get it through FDA trials, and ship it off to a lower cost manufacturing facility. And so I got what I was looking for there, and sort of brought me to my next realization that I wanted to try something in an unregulated industry. So I jumped ship. I had a friend who I was talking to about potentially starting a business, and he said, "Why don't you come on over and do this with me?" And I said, "Well, what would I do?" And he said, "I have no idea." And I said, "Perfect, sounds great. I'm in. Let's do it." And so I jumped ship, and I believe my first title was like director of special projects or something, like very indicative yes. of the fact that I had no idea what I was going to do. But I was the most technical person on the founding team, and ended up being sort of the translation layer between our engineers and sort of the business side of the house. And turns out that's called product management in the tech world. And so I became a student of product management and software engineering, really fell in love with software. And that experience lit my entrepreneurial fire as well. So I led the product and engineering teams at that company, grew it for 6-7 years, eventually got acquired by Allstate, and spent 6 months getting the ship to port. Figured that the big company scene was not my thing, and had the itch to go start something else. So I did, and then fast forward to the beginning of the pandemic when we were seeing sort of the world fall apart, all the loss of human lives and the economic devastation that was happening at the time too. And just felt really compelled to jump in and do something to help. And so, that's where, R0 came to be, but collected to my two co-founders that I'd known from sort of a past life. And we were off to the races.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's incredible. It's a similar story just in terms of like going from, big company to small company. And then once you get into a small company, there's something there that says, I'm not going back to the big company again. It sounds like you had that bug and you weren't going back. You were continuing the entrepreneurial route. So
yeah, it's funny. Like I think you're right. I think my whole life I was taught to put your head down, work your way up the ladder,
right.
Stay loyal to the company that you start with, and I've always been sort of I've maybe malaligned, maladjusted, and I don't, the status quo doesn't sit right with me, and so I've always sort of tried different things, taken different risks. And I remember when I jumped ship from the medical device industry to a startup where I had no idea what I was going to do. I remember telling my parents, and like they couldn't wrap their heads around it. And I remember my mom was like, we will always have a place for you. If this doesn't work out, you can always come home. Like, well, and I was like, Mom, you already converted my bedroom to an office, but thank you for the offer. And thanks for the faith in me. But I think the point was like, you realize a couple of things, but one is like at a startup, or any role where you're taking a leap of faith and trying something you've never done before, you get to figure out what you're made of. You are accountable for the wins, you're accountable for the losses, and you have to kind of build your own safety net. And it's a really empowering thing when you start to realize like, hey, I've got this. Like, and then the other thing that was one of the sort of unlocks for me was realizing like nobody knows what they're doing in this world. If you're doing something that no one's ever done before, like there's no playbook for it, and you kind of just have to figure it out. And understanding that other people are in that same boat, it was sort of empowering to me as well. And once you catch the bug and prove to yourself that you trust yourself to just figure it out, then it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I agree. So what was the big idea that started R0? Now, what problem were you trying to solve at the time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think at first it was just this like strong compulsion to help fight this global pandemic, and we didn't really know what we were going to do, but we thought that this was one of those moments throughout history where the world changes, and started looking at past historic events and seeing what we could glean from how the world changed from those things. And most recently we looked at like 9/11, for example, and out of 9/11 came basically the entire Homeland Security apparatus. So hired 14,000 TSA agents, put air marshals on flights. You still can't carry a water bottle or wear your shoes through security. And then there was an entire private industry that was spawned to really support this apparatus. So think like the Palantirs of the world. And so, point being, there were these massive societal and infrastructural changes that arose out of this tragic event. And we thought that there would be similar changes on a global scale, but they would revolve around really two things. It's trust and safety. The safety piece is a little bit more obvious. How do we create physically safer spaces for people to gather? And then the trust piece, a little bit less obvious. It's born out of this idea that coming out of COVID, there would be sort of psychological scar tissue built up in the eyes and the minds of the public, and people wouldn't want to just go back to normal. They would want to go forward to a healthier, safer new normal. Turned out to be right. But I think, a couple of realizations that we had as we started thinking about like, what does this business look like post-COVID? A couple of realizations we had that led us to how we see the world, one being, similar to you. And I think you kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the show, at the intro, but beginning of the pandemic, like everybody's wiping down their groceries with like Clorox wipes. Yeah. And, you had the quarantine box in the corner of your garage. So you take your hazmat suit off when you come home from the grocery store. But point being, had this sort of light bulb moment that we're still using the same archaic chemicals to fight COVID in 2020 that we used to fight the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. And in those 100 years, we've sent people to the moon. We've, invented the internet and self-driving cars, and but we're still using the same archaic chemicals, and thought that there had to be a better way. Another realization we had was that, humans are an indoor species. We spend 90% of our lives indoors, and the implications of that are that the indoor spaces where we do spend our time have a massive impact on your overall health. And I would go as far as to say that your facilities manager, or the person making decisions about the buildings where you spend your time, has a greater impact on your overall health than your doctor does. And I truly believe that. And then the third realization that we had was basically, look at the data from before COVID. Like, we've done an objectively terrible job at keeping ourselves safe in what really amounts to our natural habitat as humans, indoor spaces. Like 40 million Americans get the flu every year, and somehow we've just accepted that that's normal. And MRSA, or staph infections, kill more people every year than emphysema, Parkinson's, AIDS, and murder combined. And so, we thought that, this problem exists, and there are tools and technologies out there that if we put them together in the right way and innovate, that we can actually improve the quality of human health and really, create safer natural habitats for ourselves, indoor spaces. So we were off to the races.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I've seen the products been on your website, and it's pretty innovative. And I think it's definitely a need. There's definitely a need for it. And I think you've shown where there's needs for it in hospitals and schools and really any indoor space, really in workplaces. It's fantastic. And again, as we go back to work, right? Those of us who are going back to offices, how do we, like you said, we want to feel safe. And this is a way where you can say that there's some level of safeness, or, something that's being proactively maintaining a safe environment. I think it's fantastic. So you've definitely you struck while the iron was hot, as they say, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think if the pandemic hadn't happened and I knew what I know today, I absolutely still would have started this business. Yeah. I think this was a need that was unmet. And I think it's, frankly, crazy that we regulate the water that we drink, maybe a liter or two of a day, but we do nothing to regulate the indoor air that we breathe 18 to 20,000 times a day. And
good point.
And there's you start to learn all these weird anecdotes. Like, for example, if you and I were sitting in the same conference room together right now, with a few other people, on average, about 4% of the volume of every single breath that you take was in somebody else's lungs in that room. It's kind of the equivalent of respiratory backwash. And when you start to think about these things, it makes a ton of sense. Why don't we do something, better than we have before? And I think that, COVID has created this societal awareness of the relationship between indoor spaces and human health. And I think there's, that's catalyzed the demand, but I think this was inevitable. And frankly, I think it took too long for us to get to this point where we realized that we need to improve.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. It's fantastic. And again, a lot of people were making ventilators, when the thing came out, all these companies jumped on the ventilator bandwagon. You kind of sat back and said, well, what's it going to be at the end of all this? And you guys have a product that really provides a great solution. So, my hat's off to you for that. That's fantastic. So one of the things I was to ask you is, what are some of the challenges going from 3 employees to 150 plus employees in 2 years? And I know I've gone through similar growth things in my career, growth curves in my career. So I want to hear from you. What were some of the challenges that you faced as you grew the company that fast?
How much time we got? It is unequivocally, the most difficult challenge I've faced as in my professional career. It's incredibly, humans are complex. And people are, it's my lizard brain, linear thinking, engineering mind, wants deterministic, inputs and outputs. Humans are not that way. It's the opposite. But I think one thing that compounds some of the difficulties is the remote environment. So we are remote first, in office second. So we do have a headquarters here in Salt Lake City. We also have some physical space in San Francisco where most of our product and engineering team are, but we have employees in 14 different countries all over the world. And we got to come together, collaborate and make progress. And so that compounds our challenges. But I think it largely comes down to communication and context. I think, when you're adding 15 people every other week to the team, it's really challenging to keep everybody aligned, tightly aligned, and moving in the same direction. And it requires, over communication, and there's roles and responsibilities that are changing, priorities that are shifting all the time. And there's so many moving pieces you have to try to keep together, it's really, really challenging. I think that the making sure that everybody has the context they need to be able to be autonomous and make the decisions, push the decision making down into the teams where the work's actually getting done. That's incredibly challenging. I think that being focus is another challenge. So you bring new people on, there's fresh ideas and a lot of good ideas, really good ideas. But you can't possibly do everything at once. And so we historically, I'll take credit for this. Like, I'm not great at saying no to things, or haven't been, but you have to, or you'll, death by 1,000 paper cuts is sort of the inevitability. And, as a startup, you have limited resources, and time is the enemy, I guess. And so you have to be laser focused on what the mission is and make sure that everybody's pulling in the same direction and not a second is wasted. It's easier said than done, and I can't claim that we've gotten it 100% right by any stretch of the imagination. But I think those are the biggest things: is just the communication and the focus as you continue to scale. But it's really hard.
Yeah. I was just thinking that, one of the things, as you go from 3 to 150, one of the things I think might be difficult, and I was wondering how you did it, is how do you, you have a founder's intent, you're a startup, so you have your founders over there, and you have how do you prevent like mission drift? How do you prevent like, these new people coming in with their own ideas, and then suddenly you're off in a direction that wasn't the intent of the company at all? So how do you keep everybody kind of glued to the mission, the original mission of the company? Has that been difficult, or is there tricks that you've used?
Yeah, extremely. And,
okay.
And like, I won't sit here and pretend to have like all the world's problems solved. There's some things that I think we've done right, whether intentional or unintentionally. But I think we've gotten, luckily gotten more right than we have wrong. But I think the mistakes are the things that give you the scar tissue that allow you to get things more right than wrong moving forward. But I'd say that, it starts with people. Like, you have to hire the right people. Because the early leaders that you bring into your company are going to have an outsized impact on who you become as a company and how you execute and how the team thinks, your ability to recruit and build and scale. But the early leaders are going to set the trajectory for the different functions that they lead, and so you have to really, really get those right. Luckily we brought on some incredible people early on. I'll call out one, Neil Day, who's as much a mentor to me these days as he is an employee of R0. But he's our CTO, and he's built a world-class engineering team. But people are drawn to him; they want to work for him, and he's just an incredible leader. And having him early on it has made an outsized impact on the quality of our engineering team and our ability to scale there. And it's just, I'm blown away at what he's been able to do. But, if you bring in the right people on, they'll attract the right people. A lot of leaders like Neil, for example, had people from his network that, he brought along that are just absolute world-class talent that would follow Neil through the gates of hell. And so that's, a very positive example. And then, on the flip side, like, we've definitely gotten some hires wrong, hired the wrong sort of skill set for the stage we were at, hired people that were extremely talented, but didn't have we figured we'd put them somewhere, we'd figure out where to put them later. Without sort of squarely defined roles and responsibilities. There's a number of things we've gotten wrong with the hiring, but getting hiring wrong, especially the early leaders, hurts the most. And the sort of consequence of getting it right is the biggest value add and the biggest benefit. But it all starts with people.
I was wondering about that. And I've had similar experience where I've hired good people and it sort of attract other people. But so how do you do it? I mean, you're a startup, right? So you've got people that are working for, you have a lot of contacts in Silicon Valley. So they're likely working for some pretty exciting companies, right? That are doing some world-class stuff. And you put up your sign, here we are as a company, and you say, come work for me. How do you attract top talent to a startup company where you don't have much to offer yet, right? And I know this because I'm speaking from my history too. It's like, how do you attract good people with like a hope and a dream and an idea? Just curious how you did it.
Yeah, I think time. You have to spend as much time as necessary, which is way more than you think, recruiting and finding the best people. And what's interesting is like in the early days, and this is my third company now, and I've done this wrong a number of times. But in the early days, like you adopt that mentality that, hey, we're just a startup. We don't have anything to offer. Who's going to work here instead of like a Google? But what's interesting is like we have an investor who's kind of changed my thinking and flipped the paradigm and said like, look, like it's a privilege to work here. And we're doing something special. This is an incredible group of people. And if you're going to work here, you better want to work here. And so that's a requisite when we hire people. And, it's often easy to go for the pedigree and, look at their LinkedIn, you see all those logos that are, recognizable in senior level positions. And that's really nice, on paper, but at the end of the day, what's going to get people out of bed every day, what's going to get them to persevere through the tough times and the challenges is if they're actually motivated by the mission and they have this sort of intrinsic draw to what you're doing. And I would take somebody that wants to be here over somebody who, isn't, fully bought in 10 times out of 10. Even if their resume might not look the same. Of course, they have to have the right skill set fit and things like that. But you just have to be really true and honest to like who you are, very authentic. You have to have a point of view on what you're building and where you're going, and make sure that that there's alignment around those things, and what people can bring to the table. And I think that's the most important thing is you have to know who you are, be able to articulate that to the world, and make sure that as a bare minimum requisite, like people have to be motivated by the mission and bought in and passionate about what you're doing, more than anything.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's the people that kind of buy into this and they get excited about what you're trying to do. You're making a dent in the universe. You're doing your own dent, and they want to be part of that. Now, it's been interesting how I've kept employees for so long that I thought, well, there's no way this person will stay with me, and they have stayed because they're excited about the mission. And that's what, and really, if you can find people that are passionate about what you're trying to do, they're not going to be looking for all the, the benefits of a big company. They see something where they can have their hands and be an integral part of something that's doing something completely different. And they're excited about that opportunity. So yeah, I think the mission drives a lot of those people that come that want to do something special. And it sounds like you had a pretty good luck with that. So.
Yeah, it's been tough, but I think, you look at like guys, I'll pick on Neil again. Like Neil was the CIO of Walmart, and in the early days, I was like, why is he even talking to us? Let alone, and to him, this is a really, really interesting problem to solve. And he knows that, it benefits people and he's intrigued because he knows that like, hey, there's an opportunity, there's a technology gap here. And like, I know technology and I think I have something to offer in solving this problem. And it's really interesting and it's solvable. And so, that immediately resonated with Neil we truth be told, we actually brought him on as an advisor first, playing the long game. And we knew that once we got him involved and got him in the lab, like, I caught him soldering a bunch of resistors to a PCBA one time. I was like, all right, he's in, like, we've got him. So, but yeah, it's really hard to find those people. And, we're lucky to have Neil, and we're lucky to have a lot of the other leaders that we have as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I read is your leadership philosophy was really interesting to me. You say it's to create an environment where people can do the best work of their lives. Now, I love that. Why did you choose that as a mantra? Because I love that.
I think that, I talk a lot to the team about how, a company is just like, it's this weird thing. And I got this from from a book that I read a while back called Sapiens. But it was talking about like the idea of a company. And like all a company is a bunch of people that are aligned around like an idea. And like if like everybody left R0, like R0 doesn't exist. Like nobody's, there's not a thing that represents R0. Like our products will be in the field or whatever, but like like R0 doesn't exist. It is this amalgamation of people that are aligned around this idea. And so I talked to the team about how like we as a company will only ever be as great as our people. And we bring people on because like, I'd say fairly decent at a lot of different things, but not particularly expert in very many things at all. And so, you bring on people that know more about their function than you do and get out of the way. You bring them on to tell us what to do and to lead. And so I think that if you boil that down to sort of first principles, it's about like performance conditions. It's about the environment and creating that environment to allow people to do the best work of their lives here. And so you bring on the right people and you create that environment, and magic happens. And you have people that, and frankly, like you don't have time to micromanage as you scale, and oftentimes it's hard to relinquish a lot of the decision making, especially early on in your career as a transition to a leader. But at the end of the day, like my job is to define the what, not the how, and make sure that we are all pointed in the same direction. But again, get out of the way and allow the team to work. And the hard part is I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but like really push, like you want to drive autonomy up and context up, and so you push the context down into the teams where the decisions are actually getting made and the work's actually getting done. And if you can do that successfully, then not a lot needs to get like run up the flagpole. People don't get analysis paralysis. They just get it intrinsically. They know the mission, they know the direction we're going, and they can figure it out. Because there's a lot of people a lot smarter than me on the team that are solving these problems, and that's what we brought them on to do. And so that's where you get the magic, is when you have this sort of like unconstrained thinking, but this sort of tight alignment towards a common goal or a mission. And you create the team structure and organize the team in the right way. You create the right feedback loops and communication channels, and just let the team go. And it's amazing to see what people can accomplish.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I know I write about the same exact thing in my books, and but yet I don't see as many leaders doing that. So they think that they have to have all the answers, that they need to control things, that they need to have strict policy and procedures. And you've come to this realization that if you bring on great people and you set a vision and a mission and you align everybody towards those goals, then you don't really have to have a lot of control. You really actually are freeing people up to bring their best to work every day. And what you end up getting is better performance than if you try to control it all from the top. And it seems to not be understood by a lot of companies still. They're still trying to push down these ideas. And you're always limited to the capability of the leader when you do that, right? And as you're quick to point out, a lot of things, but you're not an expert in everything. And I'm the same way. I know a lot of things, a lot of experiences, but there are people on my team every day that blow me away with ideas that I never thought of, right? And you're just like, oh shoot, that would work, and you get excited. I get excited, like we could do that,
Exactly.
And so I think you unleash that potential when you give people that freedom to bring themselves to work and to be their best. So I commend you for that. And I don't see enough leaders practicing that very simple philosophy.
Yeah, I say it out loud. I don't always practice it. I'm working every day on becoming a better leader. It's easier said than done. And I had a mentor equate this sort of style of leadership to like backseat driving. And so, if you're with a bunch of friends and you're like, hey, let's go out to dinner at, restaurant A or whatever. Like you define like, hey, let's go meet at restaurant A at 5 p.m. And you don't get in the car with them and backseat drive and say, hey, take a left here, take a right here, take a left here. Like you all know the destination, and you got to trust that people are going to know how to get there. And, they might take a different path than you, and they might take a shortcut that you didn't know about. They might take a little bit longer to get there. But at the end of the day, what matters is the destination. It's the what. That's the outcome.
Yeah, I agree. That's great. So, we're wrapping up, getting close to the end here. What kind of advice would you give to other maybe some other people that are considering starting up a company and building a team, and what, based on your experiences, the scars, the cuts, the bruises, what's some advice you give to startup CEOs today?
This might not be like typical or like super inspirational advice, but it's the God honest truth. I'd say take a good hard look in the mirror and really ask yourself like how bad you want it. And if you don't have a burning passion in this like, like insatiable like desire to go do this, then don't do it. The reason I say that is because it's really, really hard. Like you sacrifice your relationships, you sacrifice, family and friends, and you sacrifice your weekends, vacations. You read about it and you read about like the rainbows and unicorns in TechCrunch, but you don't read about the 99% of companies that don't make it. And, some of the most difficult things I've ever had to do in my life, stemmed from me being a part of a startup, and it's not easy. And you have to have that will to win and persevere. That's table stakes. But if you do have that, then do it. One sort of middle ground is go join a startup. And if you want to, test it out, go join a startup and see what it's like. It's a lot of duct tape and bale wire under the hood. It's chaotic, it's hardworking, but it is the most rewarding thing that I've ever done in my entire life is being able to, prove to yourself that you can fundamentally change the way that the world does something or control your own destiny. And I think that's what's empowering about it. That's what's like infectious, I guess, pun intended, about it to me. And that's what's most rewarding. But you can change a lot of people's lives if you get it right. But it's not for the faint of heart. So you got to want it real bad. And if you're going to do it, people are everything. So that's the sort of positive, more inspirational, I guess, by the book answer for you.
I love it. I love it. Actually, I wrote an article one time is don't ever start a band after my first 2 years of startup life.
Yeah.
It's tough. So, but I think if like you said, if you can look in the mirror and say, I really want this and I really want to be committed to it, then do it. But it is going to be a lot harder than you've ever, I worked in corporations for 22 years and it was never that hard, never as hard as, making payroll, twice a month for 6 years. That's, some days it's tougher than others, but it's
exactly,
it's tough,
and the wins are sweeter and the lows are lower, but like you said, it's like the stakes are higher. Like you're putting food on the table for people's families and you're providing for them. And the decision-making changes from like tactical decision-making where it's like, hey, I'm a cog in the wheel. And like, I have to make sure that, my cog turns the right way. And if it doesn't, like the other 150,000 cogs are going to turn the right way and like, whatever.
Right.
It goes from that to more like existential threats. Like you said, how do I make payroll? Like, how do I deliver for my investors? Like, how do we get to this next milestone? But it's existential threats to not just you, but your team as well. And so there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure. And at times it's not fun, but to be honest, there's nothing I'd rather be doing. So
yeah. Same here. That's the same thing. It's addictive.
Yeah, it is.
It's crazy. It's hard work, but it's also, like you said, the highs are high, the lows are low, but it's a wild ride. I'll never work for another company again. I like the startup life. So yeah, excellent. Well, Grant, this has been really good. How can people find out more about you and your company?
Yeah, check us out on the internet, rzero.com. Just all one word, rzero.com. Drop us a line on LinkedIn, Grant Morgan, come look me up, and come say hi if we're at a conference that you're at. But website's the best way to get a hold of us.
Okay, great. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Grant, I appreciate you coming on the show. Congratulations again for all your success. And again, it sounds like you're doing it the right way, and I commend you for that.
We're trying. So thanks a lot, John. Really appreciate you having me.
Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks again. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.